Hi everyone, welcome Hayden Hughes, co-founder and the CEO of Alpha Impacts, a crypto trading company.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
To start off, could you explain briefly what Alpha Impact does and what its mission is?
Sure. So our mission here at Alpha Impact is really straightforward. Both myself and my co-founder Austin we shared a very similar problem. When we first got into crypto, unlike many industries where there's not enough information, in crypto there's too much information. So we set out over many years on our own journey of learning crypto trading. And it's very challenging to do because there's just so much different information pointing in different directions. Signal to noise ratio is very high. And so we started with this idea: what can we do to make crypto easier for the next 50 million, 100 million, 200 million people? And what that looks like for us is building a social network where it's transparent, so you can see what a top trader is doing and what they're saying, and you can decide for yourself. If this person who's saying you should buy Luna or Dogecoin or whatever, you can see their portfolio. So step one of our journey is social, step two is trading, and step three is going to be decentralized. So trying to solve some of the problems with crypto adoption by building the social layer, to build a community between expert traders who know what they're doing and people who are just getting started.
Cool. So my next question: what needs to be done to bring the next 200 million people into crypto?
Yeah, look, it's a really important question. And I think one of the things that I've seen in my 5 years working in crypto is that the level of complexity for some of the financial things that you can do on the internet today has gone up so much. I mean, cross-chain, DeFi, NFTs, it's expanded exponentially. But for the average person to get started, it's pretty scary. And so you or I probably know that there's Binance and there's FTX and there's Bybit and other places. But most people actually don't have any idea where to get started on their crypto journey. And a lot of people, unfortunately, make mistakes. They use the wrong type of trading, they use too much margin, they use the wrong exchange. So I think what needs to happen to really build the bridge for the next 200 million people to come into crypto is to have, number one, UI that doesn't require a trading background. And this is one of the things that's really driven us at Alpha Impact. If when you log in for the first time to a platform, you need to be an expert just to get started, you're alienating 90% of the possible audience. So I think it's very important to have something that people can understand. And secondly, having an ecosystem where there's trusted information. This is one of the big problems that we've seen in crypto, is that there's just so much information and you can't tell who's worth listening to and who's not worth listening to. So I think having that ecosystem where there's trust, that's very important. Regulations will also become important, and I live in Singapore where they've passed some laws that make it very clear. We always know what the regulatory status is. And really having a framework where people who are beginners can get started in a way that's comfortable. So these are some of the things that we looked at when we were starting Alpha Impact, and I think it's very important to solve some of these issues to broaden crypto.
Mm-hmm. If you had to explain to someone with a very limited knowledge of crypto why they should go to the blockchain to trade, what advantages of blockchain trading would you try to highlight?
Sure. Well, I would draw the distinction between what we call on-chain trading, which happens on places like MetaMask, where you're interacting directly with other people without an intermediary. And that can be very exciting because you actually don't have to trust any third party. There's a saying in crypto: not my keys, not my crypto. You can hold your assets in a safe place, whether it's a device or a formal custodian. So on-chain trading is very, very exciting because it removes the middleman. And what do we know about middlemen? Well, they tend to charge. They want to take either a spread, or they want a bite of the apple somehow. So financial technology has now evolved with on-chain trading in a way that there's a MetaMask browser extension that I believe will be the digital passport to the future. You can interact financially without having to talk to your bank, without having to talk to the credit card company, without having to do anything. So that's the on-chain piece. The off-chain piece is with intermediaries such as exchanges, Coinbase and Gemini and Kraken and FTX, places like BlockFi. These are centralized places that sit in usually one country, sometimes many countries, and they have a fantastic ecosystem where they're bringing together a lot of different users. So with more adoption on those platforms, you start to see different types of products. And so you can push the envelope in terms of risk, you can buy an NFT, you can mint your own NFT. So the possibilities are really endless. So I think there's that would be the two pieces that I would describe would be the on-chain piece, which happens in real time, peer-to-peer, and then the off-chain piece, which is exchanges and other platforms like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to ask you a more general question about the crypto space. Look, the world's economy is in a state of uncertainty right now because of a number of factors, including the war in Ukraine. Do you think there is a special role for crypto in these circumstances?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, and I'd like to recognize that at this point in time there are many millions of people who are suffering across the world, and I don't mean to trivialize what many people are going through talking about finance, but I think that absolutely, it's clear now that not only the situation in Ukraine, but even in my home country of Canada recently, there was the trucker protest. Mm-hmm. The truckers, they all got angry and they went to the Capitol and clogged up the streets. They basically sat there. They wouldn't let traffic go through. And what the Canadian government did was they said, well, firstly, if you are one of these truckers, you might face consequences. But if you're trying to send money to these truckers, we will actually stop you from doing that. And they went one step further. They said that the crypto exchanges could actually not facilitate any types of transfers to help these truckers. So whether it's in Eastern Europe or in my home Canada, the government can come after your money. And I think the argument for decentralization is very strong. There will always be a school of thought, and look, people use crypto for committing crime. It happens. I saw recently $14 billion was the amount in 2021 that was allegedly laundered through crypto. So that, unfortunately, is not something that is unique to crypto. The fiat currency, US dollar, is I think 700 billion or more is laundered a year. So I think that crypto is certainly not unique. But one thing that we've seen, whether it's Russia and Ukraine, Ukrainians trying to get money into the country, Russians trying to get money out of the country, truckers trying to have a little quiet revolution in Canada in the very peaceful way that we do things in Canada, there is a use case for crypto, and that is that it is decentralized. So I think that's some of the thinking so far that a lot of people have been looking at.
You just said that there are cases when crypto is used for criminal activities. What is your overall take on anonymity in crypto? Do you think users should have the right to remain anonymous?
So I think there's two conversations, right? And I think that let's talk about anonymity. There are very few places today that you can go on the internet that you can be anonymous. Your laptop, maybe nobody's listening, but if someone wanted to, they could. In your country, in my country, the court can authorize these things. My cell phone, devices around us, and it might not be the government, it might not be the police, it could be some hacker somewhere. So I think, when I think about the growth of technology over the past 25 years, there's really no place where we can be anonymous. And so having an anonymous financial system, I think, gives people a tremendous amount of freedom, because there is an ability to conduct transactions, whether or not there's a war, whether or not you're a trucker and you don't want to be stopped. So I think having that anonymity is important. I also think that it's important that the platforms that interact with crypto have the right systems in place to make sure that there's no criminal activity happening. The vast majority of crypto is not used for nefarious purposes, but unfortunately there will always be those cases. And so I think balancing the amazing potential that blockchain technology provides, which is that it gives us the ability to be anonymous and transact anonymously. If I send you Bitcoin from my wallet to yours right now, if nobody knows our wallet addresses, that is an anonymous transaction. So I think balancing the right to be anonymous against the need to make sure that there are controls in place to make sure that this financial crime doesn't occur. But the one thing I would say is that the sophistication of the companies like Chainalysis that are doing monitoring and detection is so high now with law enforcement across the world. If I was going to commit a crime, the last thing I would ever want to do is use a system where the transaction is going to be stored forever. Cash is cash. I can give you $100 right now. Nobody will know. But if I send you $100 in Bitcoin, there is a transaction on the blockchain and it will be there forever. So that would not be my preferred approach. So I think it's an important thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about a few general issues that the crypto space has been facing. For instance, interchain communication. How far are we from solving this issue, from getting really efficient interchain communication?
Yeah, look, interchain operability is super important. And I think for those who might be watching who don't know, there are different blockchains that behave differently. And the Ethereum blockchain is one of the biggest ones. And there are many, many other applications and blockchains that are based on the Ethereum blockchain. But there are also totally different blockchains that don't intermingle at all. Bitcoin is a great example. It was the kind of original blockchain, and very hard for Bitcoin to interact with other blockchains. So I think having a framework where you can have an interoperable ecosystem is what it will take. I think what I've seen, certainly from my friends at FTX and Jump Trading, Solana. My personal thesis is Solana may be the cross-chain settlement layer for a lot of different platforms, applications, these types of things. I'm really impressed with what a lot of other blockchains are doing as well. That's just one recent memory. But I think that we're very, very early. 1inch is doing amazing work, bridging all of this fragmented DeFi landscape. So I think but just to kind of come back to the point of adoption, we're at such an early stage. I mean, forget about cross-chain. Just looking at the Ethereum blockchain, there's some adoption there. There are other blockchains where there's adoption. But when we think about what that will look like in 10 to 15 years from now, I think we're in year, we're in like year 2 out of 50 in metaphorical terms. So I think the adoption of blockchain overall is still very early, and the adoption on these chains is very early. And you're having chains that are coming out now, and I'm thinking of my friends super oracles in Asia, and they're still in testnet. They, I think, will go on to do great things, but we need to have a framework where all these chains can talk to each other. So the chains themselves, there's been a lot of efforts by a lot of different projects to bridge, and unfortunately the structure of a cross-chain bridge has made, there's a piggy bank there. There's assets that go in and assets that come out, but the assets sit there. And so they've been a very attractive hacking target, places like Wormhole and recently Ronin. So I think we're still very early. I think there's some security bugs that need to be worked on. I think that the number of people who can help build these solutions and protocols is still very small. You're looking at hundreds of people worldwide. That needs to be in the thousands or tens of thousands before we really get to the scale that we need to make this a everyday part of blockchain and crypto.
Mm-hmm. Scalability.
Yeah.
This is another major issue. What are your thoughts on
Yeah. Look, I started in crypto in 2017, and every conference I went to, there was a Ethereum killer token that said we have 10,000 transactions a second, 100,000, 10 trillion transactions a second. And it's theoretically possible to have an infinite number of, well, not infinite, but a very high number of transactions per second if you only have 5 transactions a day. Mathematically, it's just so easy when there's no friction on the network. I think that all blockchains, so there's almost a Pandora's box of these blockchains that are out there that say, hey, we're going to be the next Ethereum because we're so much faster and more scalable. But you see them all slow down. I mean, even Polygon, the fees today compared to a year ago have changed. Still cheap, but we've seen a change there. So I think having blockchains that are scalable it's very important. I believe that you're going to see a multitude of layer 1 chains, and then there's going to be a number of L2s sitting on top of that. But a lot of people just stop there. I actually look at the application layer. I look at L3. And on Binance, on FTX, on other places, there are millions of people transacting off-chain. And this is getting back to what I said before. So I think having, and look, I talk to lots of investors, and they're knocking on the door sometimes. Having a lot of layer 1s is great, but then the layer 2s and even the layer 3s, the application layer, are very important to actually growing the ecosystem, because at the application layer, you're not interacting with the blockchain. And so I see that as actually a really great way to exponentiate the amount of users that can be interacting with blockchain without necessarily having that as a peer-to-peer traffic jam.
Mm-hmm. And finally, I would like to ask you about DAOs.
Yeah.
Like this is a very cool decentralization tool, but can we imagine a situation when DAOs are used outside the traditional blockchain context, like the DAO model used for running regular real-world organizations? Can you imagine that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we look across the world at the amount of stuff that's happening, I mean, just off the top of my head, there are elections in many countries that the international community looks at, places in sub-Saharan Africa. And there are elections that officially, candidate A wins 90% of the vote, and candidate B, wins 6% of the vote. And I'm not singling out any individual countries, but democratic institutions could borrow from this technology stack to conduct things in a way that is provable, that is on-chain, that cannot be hacked. Whether that's a permissioned blockchain, poses some legacy issues, who's going to be the one designing it in the first place, or whether it's an open blockchain like the Ethereum blockchain or some of the EVM compatible ones. That is certainly an area where I think you could see growth. And it doesn't need to be financial with, you could have everyone gets an airdrop of one, whatever, Canada coin, right? It's not worth anything, but at the end of the election cycle, they tally up the number of Canada coins for candidate A or B. So I think voting is an interesting use case. Certainly the Oscars. I mean, I'm not a big movie guy, but and hey, look, I saw the video of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock just like everyone else. But the voting for that is done by a fairly small group of people, and no one really has transparency over that process. So maybe there's a world where there's a decentralized Oscars, where it's not based on these people in Hollywood who are making the voting, but it's based on the actual users of Netflix, for example. Netflix could easily implement that. So just off the top of my head, that's an interesting non-financial example that I can think of. I think the realms of possibility for a structure like a DAO to decentralize governance is huge. It feels like we're very early in terms of actually giving people that power, because power is the people that hold power are inherently interested in keeping that power, whether it's the Hollywood Foreign Press Association or whether it's a national government somewhere. So as to the implementation, I can't comment on the likelihood, but I think absolutely the technology is immensely useful, and governance is something that in many cases should be decentralized. Yeah.
Thank you, Hayden. Thank you for insights.
Thank you so much.